This is Ross Feingold on the Taiwan hashtag program, coming to you from Taipei, Taiwan, hosted by the Storm Media Group. Today we'll be talking about Taiwan's efforts to control the COVID-19 or the Wuhan flu, or as some people still like to call it, the Wu flu, here in Taiwan. A lot of media are, in fact, in Chinese characters, referring to it as literally the Wuhan flu. Maybe that's a dig at China, or maybe it's just very factual, stating that this is where it came from. Let's talk about Taiwan's efforts to continue to keep this under control here in Taiwan. As of this week, still less than 30 confirmed cases. Fortunately, the number of deaths remains at 1. Let's hope it doesn't increase. And how does Taiwan do that? Well, an important way is Taiwan's Communicable Disease Control Act. And we'll talk about 2 relevant articles today because legislators are trying to increase the penalties. So first, under Article 67, this is the clause that requires, upon order by health authorities, people to stay at home or face penalties. The penalties are up to 3 million Taiwan dollars fine. 3 million Taiwan dollars, that's about 100,000 US dollars. How does this penalty compare to other countries? Well, in the United States, if the federal government orders you into quarantine, typically, unlike Taiwan, the federal government in the United States might quarantine you in a federal government facility, and we've seen that with people who have returned from China or from the ill-fated cruise ship in Japan to the United States. They have the good fortune or the misfortune to be guests of the federal government at U.S. military bases. However, if people in the United States do break a federal quarantine order, they are subject to fines of 100,000 US dollars and up to 1 year in prison. However, those penalties do increase up to 250,000 US dollar fine and more than a year in prison if you break the quarantine and a person passes away should you transmit the disease or the illness to them. South Korea, which has been in the news in recent days for a dramatic increase in the number of confirmed cases and the number of deaths, according to their quarantine law, South Korea only has a very modest fine of about 2,500 US dollars. How about North Korea? Right in between South Korea and China. No surprise, they execute people for violating quarantine, as was reported in the global media in recent days. Here in Taiwan, maybe they're a bit generous. Only up to a 3 million Taiwan dollar fine and no prison time. So if you break quarantine, you are not necessarily going to go to jail. You can't go to jail. You might just get a fine. And how much they'll actually fine you? Well, it appears to be at the discretion of the authorities. So in Mandarin, they call this the Papa Zhou Tiaoquan, which Papa Zhou is a cute Mandarin phrase. It means for going out. Now, why would people go out? Well, here in the big cities of Taiwan, like Taipei, things are really convenient. We have food nearby, all sorts of restaurants. It's usually right downstairs from the home. People in Taiwan like to say everything is very fangbian, very convenient. So people will go out for food. They'll go out to visit their family and friends. Taipei has a great MRT, a subway system, a great bus system. Other major cities in Taiwan, like Taichung, Kaohsiung, also have very good public transportation systems. So it's easy to get around in Taiwan as well. Another reason people might break quarantine, believe it or not, is simply to go to the doctor. Taiwan has generally highly regarded medical care, and if you don't want to wait around for the doctor to come to your apartment, I guess you'll go out, you'll go visit the hospital. People in Taiwan often treat the hospital as we would treat a doctor's office in the United States. So when people have a cold or a cough, they go to the hospital, and hospitals provide this kind of first-line medical care or primary medical care in addition to the local doctor's office. So people in Taiwan might have a lot of reason to go out. They break the quarantine, and although it hasn't happened a lot, there's been a few cases of it. There isn't very effective use of electronic ankle monitoring like some countries might use. So now legislators are proposing to increase the fine beyond 3 million Taiwan dollars, potentially to add prison time for breaking the quarantine. Of course, this raises the very basic question, where would you quarantine them if they were imprisoned, if they were forced to do so? So the government would have to come up with some facilities for that as well. Is the likelihood high that the quarantine penalties will be increased? Absolutely. There is no sympathy for people who break the quarantine. Of course, the individual involved will complain. He might say he had good reason to break the quarantine. We talked about people going out for food. They should try using one of the online ordering services, going out to visit family and friends. Well, they're going to risk everyone else if they do that. Or going to visit the doctor. Maybe they should try and get a house call. So yes, highly likely in the coming days or weeks, we will see Taiwan's legislators rush through amendments to the Communicable Disease Control Act and increase the fines for people who break the quarantine order, or maybe add prison time, which would make the laws similar to the United States. Let's hope they don't add any draconian penalties like execution, such as in North Korea, or do anything as draconian as China does. We've seen those images in China of police entering people's homes, even breaking up mahjong tables in China because they don't want people gathering for activities like that. Fortunately, we don't have that here in Taiwan, but it's no surprise that according to a new survey here in Taiwan, just released on Monday of this week, the majority of people, over 60% of the people, have no confidence. No confidence. Here we see over 60% of the people in Taiwan, no confidence in China's ability to control the outbreak of the virus. The other article of the Communicable Disease Control Act that legislators are looking at amending is the section on spreading, fake news, disinformation about the availability of things like masks or food and other supplies, daily necessities. Again, the penalties for doing so are very light, up to a 3 million Taiwan dollar fine. So, spreading disinformation on the internet about the virus, it happens all over the world, unfortunately, including here in Taiwan. So legislators are looking at increasing the penalties. So if you spread some false information about the availability of masks, which are still available, the supply seems to have stabilized here in Taipei. We talked about in a previous show using your health insurance ID card to buy up to 2 masks every 7 days. As more supply comes on, those numbers or the availability hopefully will increase. So most goods are available, yet people are still spreading this kind of disinformation. There were some short-term dislocations. I went to the store and the shelf where toilet paper and other types of tissue paper normally is available, it was completely empty. So yes, it did happen, but most of these situations have been resolved. So should the authorities change the law to increase the penalties for spreading disinformation about the availability of daily necessities? Again, just like people who break quarantine, there's probably not going to be much sympathy. So yes, go for it, legislators. Increase the penalty for spreading fake news about the availability of daily necessities here in Taiwan during the virus. What else are we looking for as far as virus control in Taiwan? The ability of foreigners to enter Taiwan continues to be heavily restricted. If you're from China or you're from Hong Kong, don't expect to enter Taiwan very easily unless, for people from Hong Kong, if you have a residence card for Taiwan, you might be able to enter, but you'll have to be quarantined. Other foreigners who've traveled to China, you're not going to be allowed into Taiwan either. These strict rules are still in effect. So for foreigners to enter Taiwan, you have to be a resident, and if you went to China, you are not going to get in. If you're a resident who went to China, you're going to be quarantined, just like a Taiwan person will be quarantined if they have recently visited China. Be that as it may, it's hard to believe, but yes, flights are still going between Taiwan and China. Why is that? Because a lot of Taiwan-based people who normally are working in China, they still need to go back to their jobs because their employers, in some cases, are telling them, you have to go back to China to return to your job. Otherwise, there might be some impact on the company. So that's another interesting topic we'll be talking about in the coming weeks, the economic impact of the virus on Taiwan's economy. I'm Ross Feingold. You've been watching Taiwan Hashtag on the Storm Media Group.